Hello, good day to you and welcome to Progecad Malaysia. Today I'm going to talk about layering your drawings. Just imagine if you have a lot of documents and you want to organize it in a cabinet form. You actually indicate A to Z and then you arrange the documents according to A to Z. So that in the future you want to take out any documents, it will be easier in that sense because it is organized in A to Z rather than in a messy form where you try to look for documents but you cannot find any of the documents in that cabinet. In Progecad, layering is basically the same function. You organize all your entities into layers so that in the future, any modification or any changes to that particular DWG, you will know that this layer belongs to this and that layer belongs to that entity. In my example of this little room drawing, you will see that it is organized into a couple of layers. First is dimensioning, the dimension layer, text layer, door layer, wall layer, windows layer, and so forth. Hence in the future, I want to do any changes to the wall. I know what to do and I know which layer actually has the wall. It will be easier for me to do any changes to the wall or add any information that I need into the DWG. Now we look at the layer, how to access the layer. We will go to Home menu and then under we'll go to Layer Manager. Layer Manager will indicate all the layers that you have created and what are the colors that has been created for that particular layer. There are people doing this. Say for example, I have actually set current the wall layer. Now let's withdraw some walls entity onto the DWG. We close this and I add a line. Say for example from here to here and then another line from here to here. Of course, you can actually just change the color of these two walls by clicking on this tool and then go into properties to change that layer into say the color to magenta color. With this, my magenta is actually 0.6 pen thickness, but one problem is if I were to do this in the future, if I want to change any of the layer to any other colors, I will not be able to change this magenta color. Beforehand, why do we need to add colors to any layers? If you are not sure, you can actually refer to my other video which is under Plot a Drawing and you know why we need colors in that layer. Now we go back to why we need to match the color to that layer rather than changing or using one layer for all your drawings and then start changing colors. Say now we want to change that wall from cyan color, which is if I use a 0.4 pen thickness, I want to change it to 0.2 pen thickness. I will just change the color in the Layer Manager. Here's how I does this. I go to Layer Manager. I change the color to 2 if I want it to be 0.2. Click OK. I close this. Now all the walls layer will be under yellow, but this 2 will remain as magenta color. This is just a small drawing. Imagine if you have a large drawings with a lot of database or a lot of entities in your drawings and you start to change the colors. Imagine how you're going to change or modify the DWG in the future if you were to decide that you want to change the pen thickness of that particular entity, like for example now the wall. Our suggestion will be always maintain the color by layer. So whenever you change that wall layer, the color, once you change that color, it will basically change the whole drawings altogether. Now let's change back the wall layer to cyan color and see what happens. We go under Layer Manager again, go under wall. Under color, we change to cyan color, color number 4 and pen 0.4. Click OK, close. All the entity under that layer will be changed back to cyan color. Now we talk about what is in the Layer Manager settings. Go back to Layer Manager. Let's look at what are the settings. We have status, name, on, freeze, lock, color, line type, line weight, transparency, plot style, plot. New viewpoint, freeze, description. We'll leave these two out because we don't necessarily use these two most of the time. Let's look at status. When we activate the status, we have a little green tick, meaning this is the current active status or current active layer. So what does it do? We close this and we draw an entity. Let's draw some lines. You probably see that whatever line that you have drawn under the current status, it will be the current layer. We go back to Layer Manager. Say we set the windows to current, which is yellow. Double click the status and you will get a little green tick. And we have set it to Windows layer as current active layer. Now we draw some lines. You see that the active layer is window and the lines drawn is actually in yellow and the layer will be set to Windows. This is what it meant by status. Then the next is name. You can name whatever name that you wanted. Of course, you name something that you are able to recognize and something relevant to your drawing. And what is on? We have on, freeze and lock. Let's go into the example of on, freeze and lock. Usually the status is actually set to on so that all the layers will be visible on your DWG. Let's say under Windows, I set it to off now. When I click close, you see the yellow window is actually missing from that drawing. You are still able to actually draw the entity onto your drawing, but it will be missing from your drawings because the layer is actually switched off. So what happens when we switch it on again? This is the extra entity or extra line that we have drawn with the layer switch off. Now what about freeze? If you're under current layer, you are not able to freeze that layer. It'll give you a dialog pop up that this layer cannot be freeze because it is the current layer. But you can actually freeze the other layers which is not set as status current status. So for example, I freeze the wall. I close. The wall layer is actually missing from this drawing. Just bear in mind, if you were to switch off or freeze that particular layer, whenever you plot onto the paper, it will not be plotted out. So let's look at this. Let's say we already freeze the wall, and then we also switch off the windows. The wall layer which is switched off will not be printed out on your printed drawing, as well as the window which has been freezed. It will not be printed out in your printed drawings. Let's unfreeze it and switch back on all the layers. And what is lock? Say for example, you want to lock up wall layer and you don't want any new entity to be drawn onto the DWG. So you lock it and you can see the icon change to a lock. Close this. You can click the layer, but you cannot do any changes to that particular layer because it is locked. It cannot be updated. Also, if you were to set current the wall layer which is locked, and when you try to draw a line, you are able to draw that line, but you are not able to do any changes to that particular layer. Now that is the difference between on, freeze and lock. Next is we go to color. Of course, the color you can set to any of the 255 colors here, but depending on what is the pen thickness on during your plot to paper, you can actually set this, and of course you can actually customize it on your own. For my drawings, it's very simple. The standard red will be color 1, which is 0.1. Standard yellow, which is color 2, will be 0.2 pen thickness, and so forth. Now let's look at line type. Say your wall, you wanted it to be a different line type rather than continuous. You just click on the word continuous. You'll be presented with another pop-up box, and you will see either dashed or dots. So let's go for -2. I'll select -2. You can set the line type scale or global line type scale. Let's not go into this. And we click OK. So now the wall is actually in -2 line type. Close this. We zoom in a bit. You should see that the wall line is actually in a different line type format. Let's convert back to continuous line for this wall. Click on the -2 and click continuous. Click OK. And we'll change back the line type to continuous line type. Of course, you can actually load the other type of line types available in Progecad. You just click the continuous and then click load. There are various line type for you to actually load, and you can actually use any of them depending on your drawing. So let's load the border line type. Now it is loaded here. Line type name, border, appearance will be something like this: dash, space, dot, space, dash, space, dash. This is just an example of what are the line types that is available. So now I have changed this to border. And our wall layer actually changed all this to border line. Go back to layer manager. We change this back to continuous line. Next will be the line width. You can also set the line width to a line width rather than follow the plot table. By default, it will follow the plot table that you have set in your plotting settings or configuration. But if you do not want it to be plotted in according to your plot style, you can actually set the line width in your layer. When you click on the default, you can see some line widths and you can set it. Our advice is you follow the default line width, so you set it while in your plotting tables rather than you set it in the layer, because again, in the future, you want to do any modification or changes, it will be very messy for you because you don't know which lines or which layer is set to that particular line width. So it's best that you control via your plot style table. Next is transparency. I would advise that you set the transparency to 0. Then next is plot style. Again, you can actually override your plot style in your layer. I also advise you to actually override it in your plot style table when you want to plot in the plot configuration rather than changing it or setting it in your layers. So you can see that color is color 4 and then plot style is actually color 4 as well. Then the next will be plot. You can actually disable plot for that particular layer by clicking on that printer icon, and you see a cross red line over the printer, meaning this layer will not be plotted out. So now we have actually disabled this and it's under the wall layer. Let's see what happens. You see the wall layer has been disabled because in the layer we have actually disabled plot to this layer. Okay, these are basically how to actually manage your layer using Layer Manager and what are the features or functions that is available in the Layer Manager. And it's also to organize your drawing into a more properly organized DWG drawing or entities rather than a messy one, so that in the future, any modification or changes to this DWG, whether by yourself or by another person, will be much easier. That's it for today. Thank you for watching and goodbye.